took care of my kids, and my first reaction was, I have nothing to write about. And I thought, okay, I'll start another mommy blog, but there were a lot of mommy blogs out there. And most of them involve people who are pretty competent at the job, so I didn't really feel qualified to start a blog on that subject. But then my kids came in to the rescue one morning as we were trying to get to school on time with all the hustling and chaos. And this post was born, which is also the kind of the genesis of the blog, and it's called Happy Homemaking. If the Perfect Housekeeping Channel ever did a show about how not to maintain the perfect house, my life would give them enough fodder for 10 seasons of episodes of how to create clutter in only 5 minutes a day, or make it from microwave. The irony is that as a mom with one of those highly coveted working at home for very pleasant people jobs, you'd think my husband would walk you through the door of a perfectly ordered house with 2 smiling, clean kids and a perfectly coiffed and aproned wife waiting to hear about his day. Instead, he drives down a dirt and gravel road to a dirt driveway and walks up the gravel pathway to our door, where it seems that our unfinished concrete floor has acquired magnetic properties that allow it to attract any type of mineral or organic material, as long as it's in toy form or has already been converted to dust. I didn't start out like this. When we first moved to Vermont, to our first real house, I was going to be the perfect country mom. I didn't work from home back then. My husband got to be Mr. Mom for a bit. But a 40-hour work week and a 1-year-old were not going to keep me from growing all our own heirloom gourmet vegetables, making my own bread from Vermont-made flour, to be served with homemade maple syrup in our perfectly restored and clean 200-year-old farmhouse decorated with quilts I was going to make by hand. And it was all going to happen while we prepared our perfectly mannered toddler, who had not yet hit the top terrible 2s, for private school and then naturally Harvard. We did get the garden going, and even managed to find time to make a couple gallons of maple syrup. But the quilting quickly became an excuse for collecting fabric that looked nice in clear plastic boxes on the shelf. And we were buying our sliced bread at the country store before the first snow fell. I had already mastered the art of maternal guilt by then, and each successive little concession was just a reminder that I was failing Supermom 102, and I had only made it through 101 on a probationary status. And then on our first anniversary as Vermonters, when we went to our first Oscars, the town's annual potluck feast, whose centerpiece is a spit-roasted side of beef fresh from the field. At the time, I thought the homespun meal and the square dancing with our new neighbors were just what I needed to get my country skills back on track. But it wasn't until a few nights later, when the hostess of the party called with 75 pounds of extra beef to sell at $1 a pound, that I learned the most important country and mom skill of all. Even divided into 75 single-pound packages, 75 pounds of beef takes up a surprising amount of room in your freezer. And it was just the excuse I needed to buy the appliance I coveted most, another freezer. Our budget was tight, so I turned to the lines and found a promising listing for $50. It was just a town over, so one Saturday morning, I strapped my almost 2-year-old in the car and took a little field trip. When we got to their farm, my son and the seller's adorable daughters toddled around her yard while she showed me her garden and the freezer, which was sitting in her barn right beside her successor. Probably to reassure me that she was selling because of a desire for better features and not any malfunction, she opened the new freezer, which was already fully stocked with produce from her garden and a healthy selection of distinctly unhomemade, prepackaged dinners. Have you ever tried their fried chicken, she asked, pointing to a bright red box of frozen fried chicken. It's not as good as mine, but who has time to make it from scratch every night? I have too many other things at the top of my list. After that, I didn't make concessions. I slaughtered sacred cows. This next piece is called Waiting to Exhale. And He's been sick for all of 2 weeks, but he seems to understand that as his birthday approached, we were crossing a divide, at least when it came to our bedtime routine. Cheese co-slept with us while he was nursing, and when he transitioned to his own bunk in the room he now shares with Thing One, his 12-year-old brother, I adopted the practice of lying down with him at bedtime. I did this with Thing One for a short time, and it seemed to smooth out the rough spots as he became more independent. With Thing Two, however, at least one of my reasons for this routine was selfish. Thing One is already taller than I am, and while he still needs hugs and comforting when he's down, I still marvel at how quickly he went from my arms to my lap and then to the world at large. I know it is going even more quickly with Thing Two, and when he embraces his independence, this special time will be gone forever. The next epoch will be just as special, but our quiet time at night gives me the chance to be mindful of this one, of his arms around my neck, and of the melting of a smiling imp into a sweet, slumbering angel. As his birthday approached, however, our routine became more and more brief. He doesn't need help getting ready for bed anymore. Increasingly, the routine consists of Thing One and Thing Two giggling as they brush and wash and bustle into their bunks. They whisper their secrets in the dark, and then, more often than not, snoring replaces giggles before I even have a chance to sit down for a snuggle. This is as it should be, but 5 is not 6, and even 6 needs a snuggle some nights. As we move closer to the divide, however, even our snuggle time has changed. The giggling does not stop merely because Mom is there. Often I spend as much time shushing as snuggling, and it is always at bedtime that I get to hear the newest phrase that Thing One has acquired on the playground before dutifully passing it on to his brother. It was when the first phrase of the evening emanated from the top bunk last night that I realized I was about to be relegated to a role on the sidelines of the bedtime routine. Thing One was already giggling when I kissed him goodnight, and the grin on Thing Two's face should have been a clear sign that my presence would only amplify the silliness. I had just wrapped Thing Two in a hug when the first classic line floated down from the top bunk. Beans, beans, the musical fruit. That's enough, I interrupted, before Thing Two could learn any new poetry. But Thing One began again, and I could feel Thing Two beginning to quake. I shushed, they giggled. I shushed again, and quiet reigned. But not for long. This time the line was a whisper, and I found myself working not to chuckle. Thing Two held his hand over his mouth, and I knew even the hint of a giggle from me would send them both over the edge, so I held my breath. Thing One knew it was time to quit, and for a few minutes I only heard an occasional squeak as he suppressed a laugh. Thing Two quickly lost his fight with sleep, and I was finally able to breathe without a giggle and without contributing to more chaos. I stood up and gave Thing Two another kiss on the head before heading back to the living room for grown-up time. But as I walked out to the bright kitchen, I exhaled again, and my smile faded. I knew that the boys had begun adopting their own routine without my help. There will be more silliness and snickering from the bunk room, and we'll chuckle as we listen to their whispering. They'll become more independent in this routine just as they have